Your response to school staff after a 12-minute meeting was, "Are we done here?"
Are we done here? We got to get to the range. We got to get to the shooting range so he doesn't miss any kids as he's shooting them. A judge is going to take a sentence and curl it up as nice and tightly and shove it up your ass if you're rolling your eyes during a sentencing. You know, you have a duty as a parent. If your child is harming others, you need to remove that child from that harm, right? You have a duty. You just do.
While your son was hearing voices and asking for help, I was helping Madison pick out her senior classes.
And what do you have for a child? Dreams, hopes, aspirations. They're all gone. They're just gone in the blink of an eye. Why? Because a young kid decided to bring a gun to school and had a fascination with killing.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your very own board-certified criminal defense lawyer. And when I say I'm your very own, you know who you are. I am there for you as your very own personal board-certified criminal defense lawyer. But I'm not here by myself. I'm here accompanied by Michael Rivers, who is the content genius, man behind the plan, man behind the camera, the man behind every good idea I ever had. And today we're reacting to the verdict. I know it's a little bit, it's happened a little bit ago, but there are some interesting legal issues regarding the Crumbleys. Now, remember the Crumbleys were the parents of the young boy who shot up his school and killed some people. Before we get to that, this is brought to you by eForms.com. eForms.com is a very effective way to avoid the high cost of a lawyer if you need to get something done, legally speaking. For example, if you sell a car, if you rent a house, if you have any kind of legal document that you need, power of attorney, go to eForms.com. It's very easy, it's very affordable, and it will prevent you from having to go to court most often, because if you have to prove something and you have a written agreement in hand, go to eForms.com and they will make sure that you stay out of court. You'll save so much money just by getting the document done through eForms, but it'll also protect you down the road. So eForms.com, very effective way to protect yourself legally and avoid the high cost of a lawyer. All right, so let's just kind of backtrack. You remember they had the trial of the Crumbleys. Father went out and bought his son a gun. Mom went out and bought her son bullets. And they were both charged with manslaughter. I believe it was in Michigan. Now, here's the implication for this. And I don't know if it's nationwide or if it's just it's a creative way to hold the parents accountable for buying their son a firearm and they had all the warning signs, if you remember. He had all this shit that he wrote down in his diary, or not his diary, but in his folders and for school. The school knew all about him. He had pictures that he wrote or drew about killing people, and he just had all these thoughts in his head. Why would you buy that child a gun? That's really what it comes down to. And so when you're looking at manslaughter is when you cause the death of someone in the face of basically life-threatening danger and you don't regard it. In other words, you disregard it. So they didn't cause the death, or did they? I mean, that's really what that case comes down to. They're the ones who put the wheels in motion. But for them buying a gun, their son wouldn't have had a gun to cause the death. But it's what you call liability for the crimes of another, like aiding and abetting. And that's really what this comes down to, is that they are liable for the crimes that they committed, or that their son committed. So it's vicarious liability is what we call it. Well, they had a trial, and both of them were found guilty on all counts. So they're looking at just an inordinate amount of time because they have 4 victims. And a lot of times what happens when you have multiple victims, the court will sentence them consecutively, and they'll do that in an effort to show accountability for each death. Because otherwise, there's no accountability. At least that's the way the court looks at it. So let's kind of take a look at what's going on with their sentencing hearing. Now, keep in mind, when you have a sentencing hearing, here's how it goes. The prosecutor goes first, makes their argument, and they have victim impact statements, which are always so hard to hear. Because they'll never get married, they'll never have grandchildren, they'll never be able to, all that stuff, and it's true, it's all true, and it's all heart-wrenching, but it's from a defense perspective, it's fucking terrible to listen to. So let's just kind of go through the sentencing hearing. So the prosecution goes first with their statement and the victim impact, and then the defense makes their argument, and the defendant's got the last word. It's called allocution.
The so-called loss that you say you have suffered doesn't even compare to the loss of a child.
So we got this footage courtesy of Law and Crime. And, Madison Baldwin was one of the first victims, and her mom gives up and gives a very heart-wrenching appeal to the court. And now keep in mind, Mom and Dad didn't shoot anybody, but Mom and Dad did buy the weapon and the ammunition that led to the death of these children. And they were children. They're high school children.
It was when Jennifer said it wouldn't do anything different. I'm putting a little emphasis on different, as I know life throws us things that are out of our control. I want to
if she said I wouldn't do anything differently, that's a little insensitive. That's something that Mrs. Crumbley said on the stand. And because I think she really didn't think she did anything wrong. She had a very troubled child, but she bought bullets for the gun. That was a huge problem for her. But it's really important to look at this thing from the lens of, I can imagine if her lawyer told her to say that. But, when we sit down and have like a kitchen table kind of conversation about something, it's different from being on the stand. So if she says, I would have done this differently, is she making an admission that what I did was wrong? And that's kind of, I think, where she was coming from.
compare a few things to see through my perspective, as I know things are different about the events and how we see them. While your son was hearing voices and asking for help, I was helping Madison pick out her senior classes.
See what I mean? It's like you hear these gut-wrenching, because you have a child, and what do you have for a child? Dreams, hopes, aspirations. They're all fucking gone. They're just gone in the blink of an eye. Why? Because a young kid decided to bring a fucking gun to school and had a fascination with killing.
While you were purchasing a gun for your son and leaving it unlocked, I was helping her finish her college essays. When you texted, Ethan, don't do it, I was texting Madison, I love you, please call Mom. You show no remorse, no respect or compassion for our family. The same traits that you've bestowed upon your son.
Remorse is one of the things. Remorse, there's two main components to a sentencing for a defendant. Remorse and acceptance of responsibility. The court wants to know that you feel badly for the victims in the case. I also want to make sure that it's not going to happen again.
The traits that have torn my family into pieces. The lack of compassion that you have shown is outright disgusting. Not only did your son kill my daughter, but you both did as well. The words involuntary should not be a part of your offense. Everything you did that day, months prior, and days after were voluntary acts of your son to commit a murder.
Now, when you're a parent and you're speaking on behalf of your dead child who was gunned down in a high school, hard hard to kind of go against what she's saying, honestly. But the word intentional or unintentional, and this was unintentional manslaughter, which that's what manslaughter is. It's an unintentional killing. Hard to say this is anything but unintentional. There's no way that the parents wanted anybody to die. But were the parents liable? I mean, certainly they're civilly liable. But to ascribe a certain amount of intent to the parents is misplaced, but understandable under these circumstances.
Not just one, but multiple. Shaking your head during a verdict is the utmost disrespectful thing I have ever witnessed. At that moment, you felt your life is more valuable than my daughter's. I will say that will never be true. You created a life that you took for granted. You decided that parenting wasn't a priority. Putting your child first should be the only priority. You didn't, and because of that, I've lost my daughter.
It's so sacrosanct to go after a victim. I mean, nothing good can come of that, right? So the only thing that the defendant in a case like this can do is say, I'm sorry, I should have done things so much differently. And I'm sure they believe that. I don't think that they think they're guilty, because I don't think that they thought they actually caused the death of the children that were killed. But they did hand a gun to their son. They did put all the pieces together for this to happen. But we're looking at it in hindsight. So let's hear from another parent and see what she has to say.
It is devastating and heartbreaking that it doesn't appear that either of you cherished or even wanted your son. But I wholeheartedly wanted and cherished mine. You have failed your son, and you have failed us all. This failure had deadly consequences that can never be undone, that can never be made right.
And you can't argue with her, And so if you have a child that's plagued with something like, there's no playbook, there's no manual to tell you how to be a parent, right? I think it's a little overstated that these parents didn't love their child. What parent doesn't love their child? But the kid probably needed to be hospitalized. There's no question that this kid needed to be locked up. I don't know if he had voices or not, but he certainly had thoughts of harming people and shooting up the school, and he was telling people about it. And the school fucking knew about it. How do you not tell the parents? Or did they tell the parents? And if they did tell the parents, why didn't you do something about it? You have a duty as a parent. If your child is harming others, you need to remove that child from that harm, right? You have a duty. You just do. One of the things that victims in a case will do, they'll ask for a particular sentence. And almost every time, you hear, oh, give him the maximum sentence allowed by law, Your Honor. You hear that phrase all the time. We did a reaction to this guy who killed his son. And the victim impact statement, he gets up and he asks if he can hug the defendant.
So sad for you that you have to be in this situation. I wish I could help you as I help my son to be a good citizen. If Salahuddin were to be here, if he alive, he will forgive you. That's the way he was. That's the way he is. I forgive you on behalf of Salahuddin and his mother. Thank you.
It is honestly one of the most selfless, one of the most moving things I've ever seen in my life. Because you don't see grace every day. You know what we have every day? You got honking at a horn. Fuck you. You know, we got, this is my road, Jack. Car wars or whatever. You got people saying, looking after themselves and not being compassionate. You remember the kid, I think it was South Carolina, in a Baptist church, he shot like 5 or 6 people, just went in and blasted them. And what did they do? They showed him grace and forgiveness. Any amount of jail time that these guys get is not going to bring their son back. It just won't. And it's so easy to go down that road of fuck them, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. I get it. If somebody were to harm my children, I would just be beside myself. But in the world of hate, we need more grace. Grace and understanding and love trumps everything. Pardon the phrase.
Our 10-year-old little brother had to learn how to write a eulogy for his sister before he even learned how to write essays. I met up with Hannah and a friend during school that day. When we split ways to go back to class, I just looked back and smiled. I didn't say goodbye.
Do you think that she replays that moment in her head about 3 million times a day? Of course she does. But for the grace of God, go her, right? Just awful that they had to experience that.
I never got to say goodbye. I never got to remind her that I love her, that she's my everything, the person I want to walk through life with side by side. I thought our future was a given. The fact is, no matter what you try to make yourself believe, Jennifer, you did fail as a parent, both of you. To me, that makes the maximum sentence being 15 years too short. Hannah didn't even have 15 years to live. Jennifer, you stated that even after knowing everything you know now, you wouldn't do anything different. I cannot fathom that. I would do anything to hear her footsteps coming up the stairs.
Honestly, in light of everything that happened, how could she say she wouldn't do anything differently? I mean, wouldn't you do something differently? It's like, yeah, I would have fucking locked him up, I would have wrestled the gun out of his hand. I wish I would have known that these things would have happened.
You don't have to roll your eyes, it's on video that she said that. One day, I hope you would have chosen to care for.
You don't have to roll your eyes. If you're rolling your eyes during a victim impact statement, that's a bad thing. And let me tell you something. A judge is going to take a sentence and curl it up as nice and tightly and shove it up your ass if you're rolling your eyes during a sentencing. I mean, remember the Parkland asshole? Remember his defense attorneys going like this? I mean, we have emotions, and it doesn't mean you need to display your emotions all the time. Do you know that when I deal with a prosecutor who is a fucking prick, or just nasty or whatever, when the weirder and nastier that they get, the calmer and more deliberate I get. And sometimes that really pisses them off. But I don't get disrespectful back. And you have to know your situation. You can't just be overly dramatic or even react. So rolling your eyes in this situation, what are you doing? Oh, and by the way, these comments are never supposed to be directed towards the defendant. They're supposed to be directed towards the court.
That you would not choose to buy the bullets that enter children's bodies. That you would not choose to omit relevant important information to the counselor Sean Hopkins and Dean of Students Nicholas Ejak that could have helped their incompetent brains in one shared brain cell to decide to act and search the backpack. That you wouldn't still choose to hide from accountability when you're the reason we had to hide for our lives. That you would choose to save Hannah, Justin, Tate, and Madison.
So once you get the victim impact, which is hard to argue with, and it's difficult to sit through, then you come to allocution, and that's the defendant has the last word. And one of the things I like to do is I like to meet with my client and have them write it all out. Let me see what you're going to say before you say it. Because sometimes, especially when you have a trial and she doesn't think she's guilty, for her to get up there and disavow any responsibility I mean, the facts are what they are in this case, right? It's not, and it's more of a legal question as to whether they're responsible or not. It's not really, I mean, they didn't cause the death directly. Did they cause it indirectly? And is that why they were, that's vicarious liability? That's what happened here. But to get up and say, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, and, I'm so sorry for them loss, but, falls on deaf ears. So let's hear what Miss Crumbley has to say.
Ethan, I knew, was a good, quiet kid. He loved his pets, family vacations. My husband and I used to say we had the perfect kid. I truly believe.
Who fucking believes they had the perfect kid? Nobody believes. Why, that public defender really should have, we used to think we had the perfect kid. Then what happened? Did you drop him on his fucking head? You think you used to have the perfect kid? Your kid was begging you to go to therapy. And mind you, the resources for adolescent psychology are scarce, honestly. And it's very difficult to find them. But you got a kid who is going out of his way to ask for help.
That, and that's who I saw and thought I knew. Not only were you left in the dark about previous concerning behavior, but in the counselor's office that morning, none of those previous issues were brought to our attention. I can't stop thinking, had they have been.
So you didn't know jack squat about your son's proclivities. You didn't know jack squat about the bullets that you bought your son. You didn't know jack squat about the gun your husband bought for him. You didn't know about him being at the gun range. I'm telling you, I don't like guns, honestly. I have guns, but I just, they're so dangerous in the hands of the uninformed and children. I wouldn't have bought this kid a gun.
The conversation that morning would have been much different.
Okay, so it's the school's fault. It's not your fault. This is deflecting responsibility. This falls on fucking deaf ears. So you're supposed to be, look, I did the best job I could as a parent, and I failed. I'm so sorry that 4 children's lives were lost. I'm here today before Your Honor, remorseful for my actions. If we wouldn't have bought the bullets, if we wouldn't have bought the gun, none of this would have happened, or at least we don't think it would have happened. I can't tell you, that's the tone that she should have. But instead, it's the school's fault for not telling me. And that attitude flies in the face of acceptance of responsibility and remorse, which are the only 2 things that matter in terms of sentencing.
The conversation that morning would have been much different. That we would have taken a deep dive into what's really been going on with my son. We felt confident in trusting the professional's advice to let him stay in school that day. Quote, he does not pose a threat to himself or others. It was suggested that him being around peers would probably be good. We agreed. We were never asked to take him home that day. Ethan could be your child, could be your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, your brother, your sister.
But why were you in the office to begin with? I mean, it's not like there weren't problems. There were constant problems with him. And throwing a fucking firearm and bullets on top of it, I mean, all that, what good can that, because it released no, it's just nothing good can come of that.
Your child can make a fatal decision, not just with the gun, but a knife, a vehicle, intentionally or unintentionally. If there's anything the general public can take away from this, is that this could happen to you too.
Now keep in mind, there is one element to this that is that should be kind of considered, or when you're thinking about it. They went to trial, and this has never been done before. So, in a sense, she's got to watch what she says because she does have an appeal. So you don't want to say, I did this and I should be held accountable. So there is some of that going on too. But let's see what else. We got 4 beautiful kids here that are dead. We have too many school shootings, too many mass shootings, too many guns.
I was horrified to learn my answer I would not have was completely misunderstood. That answer is true because my son did seem so normal. I didn't have a reason to do anything different. This was not...
Okay, well, that sounds like you're saying, like, we understood it then, and we understand it now. My son was so normal. Bullshit. We have a duty to go in our fucking kids' backpacks. We have a duty to go into our kids' phones. We have a duty to make sure that we know every little part about our children that we possibly can. And they're not autonomous figures. No, they're under our care, custody, and control, and we are responsible for the shit they do. They get in our car and kill somebody, guess whose insurance they go after? Ours, not theirs.
This was not something I foresaw. That was the intention of my answer and how I interpreted the question.
You know, and the foreseeability aspect of this is really probably what's going to be the crux of the legal argument on appeal.
With the benefit of hindsight and information I have now, my answer would be drastically different.
There we go. Okay, now we got a little bit of acceptance of responsibility.
If I even thought my son would be capable of crimes like these, things would have absolutely been different.
So now remember, they were tried separately. You know, Mr. Crumbley had his trial. He was found guilty. Or no, Miss Crumbley had her trial first. She was found guilty. And then he was found guilty after the fact. I think they did have kind of different roles, but they were both found guilty in separate trials. But they combined the sentencing hearings. It makes sense. Why put the fucking parents through this twice?
I want to say I can't imagine the pain and agony that the families that have lost their children and what they're experiencing and what they're going through.
A good start. That's the way I would have had it if I wrote it myself.
As a parent, our biggest fear is losing our child or our children. And to lose it.
And they lost their child too. And guess what? I think at the end of the day, they had a no contact order between themselves and between their son. They can't even contact their own son.
The child is unimaginable. My heart is really broken for everybody involved. If I could go back and change things, if I could go back and do things differently, and maybe none of us would be here today. So again, I ask Your Honor to impose a just and fair sentence based on the truth about what you heard during my trial. I'm asking the court to sentence me to time served and place me on probation for the maximum time allowed with the GPS tether.
So one of the things that you have, you contrite words, perfect, sounds all well and good. But when you're in custody, guess what happens with your phone calls? They're recorded. And guess what he said? He said he was a martyr, that when he gets out, he's going to take the prosecutor down. And there's not much he can do about that after the fact. But that's who he really is.
They cited these jailhouse phone calls from James where he allegedly not only made statements showing a, quote, chilling lack of remorse, but he allegedly made threats towards the Oakland County prosecutor, Karen McDonald.
Go ahead and record this call, he taunted. Send it to Karen McDonald. Tell her how James Crumbley is going to fucking take her down. What? Why the fuck would you do that? She will not have a law license when I'm done with her. And like I said earlier, Karen McDonald is going to be working for fucking McDonald's because she ain't going to be able to get a fucking job anywhere else. Why the hell would you say that? And he knows it's recorded. She's going to be fucking sucking on DC fucking hot rock down in hell soon. On Dick. Fucking hot rock down in hell soon. What the hell? She's going to drive me fucking insane in this place. And he also says, discusses elaborate revenge plans on the phone because I don't want to discuss my elaborate revenge plans on the phone because I'll give away stuff too. How the fuck? These convictions are not about poor parenting. These convictions confirm and repeat the acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train, about repeatedly ignoring things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of the neck stand up. That's one of the prosecutor's comments. The judge attributed Jennifer's glorification of gun ownership and her dispassionate and apathetic attitude towards Ethan as a contributing factor to the tragedy. Each of the defendants' gross negligence has caused an unimaginable suffering to hundreds of others. So, that's happening before they get to court. You're making those statements prior to court. That winds up in the pre-sentence report. Because guess what? While you are, after you get convicted, whether you enter a plea or you have a trial, then you have to meet with probation. And probation drafts a report to the court. So not only are you under the watchful eyes of the court system, everything you say on that goddamn telephone is fucking recorded. And you're an idiot and you say this shit and you know it's I don't care if it's recorded. So you're displaying who you really are and you don't give a shit about it. And you're threatening the prosecutor and you're blaming the school? Really? Just because you didn't know? It's not enough to just house and feed a child. It just isn't. You have to know what your kids are up to. You just do. If you have an umbrella policy, they sue you because of the actions of your child. You're in trouble. You need to protect others from your children if your child is being a danger. And you know if something's off. Or were they so off for so long, his offness became normal and you didn't see it. Either way, you're responsible for the action of your child. So once the judge gets all the information, so they get the pre-sentence report, and in a pre-sentence investigative report, that's something probation creates through an interview with the defendant, so Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley. They get all kinds of records, from the trial, from their background. They talk about their financial aspect of things. They talk about the family situation, all kinds of the victim impact, all these different areas of your life, and then they present this report with a recommendation to the court. You think they're going to recommend probation for somebody who's threatening the prosecutor? And you fling, or you fly in the face of common sense and decency? That you don't give a shit that things are recorded? Doesn't sound like the remorseful person that stood before the court. So then the court takes all that information, takes the arguments of counsel, takes the pre-sentence report, takes the allocution from the defendants, and the victim impact, and let's hear what the judge had to say.
I can't and will not pretend to understand the pain the families are experiencing, but I did sit through these trials with you.
No greater pain for a parent than the death of a child. I suppose maybe the slow death of a child.
I saw what you saw. I heard what you heard. So I can and will offer my deepest and most sincere condolences for your unfathomable losses. Parents are not expected to be psychic. But these convictions are not about poor parenting. These convictions confirm repeated acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train.
Now, I don't know if this is right or not right in terms of a conviction. I have mixed feelings about it. If Michael was in a shooting club, for example, as a teenager, and I didn't know about certain things, would it be fair to tag me with, a homicide if he were later to go do something? Or would it be fair, if he was, or if your child was, drinking a lot, and you give them the keys to the car hoping that they don't drink, but they drink and then they kill somebody? Would it be fair to tag that parent with a involuntary homicide? I don't know. And this has never been done before anywhere in the country. It's the first time.
About repeatedly ignoring things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of their neck stand up. Opportunity knocked over and over again, louder and louder, and was ignored. No one.
And that's not what you heard from the parents, right? You heard from the parents that it's the fucking school. It's not me. It's not me. We had the perfect child. Really? Who believes that? Nobody does. So if the question is posed, how would I defend the parents on something like this? I don't know, honestly. It's a very difficult question. But I would focus on what the parents knew and when they knew it. You know, you had Mr. Crumbley, he didn't testify. Mrs. Crumbley did testify and didn't seem to make a difference. But I think I would have maybe highlighted the lack of knowledge and the efforts they made to get their kid help, if they, in fact, they did.
No one answered, and these two people should have and sure didn't. Mr. Crumbley, it's clear to this court that because of you, there was unfettered access to a gun or guns, as well as ammunition in your home. You characterized yourself as a martyr and threatened the well-being of the prosecutor. Mrs.
Whoops. I guess that's kind of a problem for you, isn't it? I mean, why the fuck would you do that? That shows an utter lack of insight. It shows an utter contempt for the system, an utter lack, and an utter contempt for the trouble that they're in. You know, it shows a lack of mindfulness of the pain experienced by 4 families and their friends.
Crumbley, you glorified the use and possession of these weapons. Your attitude toward your son and his behaviors was dispassionate and apathetic. Your response to school staff after a 12-minute meeting was, "Are we done here?" During your trial, you announced that you wouldn't do anything.
So, are we done here? Fuck. We got to get to the range. We got to get to the shooting range so he doesn't miss any kids as he's shooting them. We're busy with our lives. You can't take your child's life with casual indifference as a inconvenience. I have a luncheon to get to. I have some mom wine time with my gal pals, and I can't be bothered with the fact that my son is homicidal. You can't fucking. That's what the judge is talking about. Are we done here? They hate the school. They had contempt for the school, and it sounds like the school had been reaching out to them.
Do anything different. I understand that might have been misinterpreted, but it did cut the victims deep. I believe that the following sentences would be in the best interest of justice and are reasonable and proportionate to the seriousness of the matter and the circumstances surrounding each defendant. With regard to Jennifer Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court, Ms. Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. As to defendant James Crumbley, it is the sentence of this court that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections.
So each of them got 10 to 15 years. But it could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse. So when looking at the complaint, they were each charged with 4 counts, 1 for each person that was killed. And they were found guilty on all 4 counts. Now, it's been said that they got the maximum sentence. They didn't get the maximum sentence. The maximum sentence would be 15 years on each count, which would be 60 years. So what the judge did is the judge ran them all concurrently, all the convictions concurrently. If, in fact, in Michigan law, because, one of the things that the Crumbley's actions were one course of conduct. Their son's actions were 4 separate actions. You know what I'm saying? He shot 4 separate people. The Crumbley's conduct was one set of actions that set into motion. So if they were convicted on 4 counts one could argue that they could have gotten 4 consecutive sentences. But one could also argue that they shouldn't be convicted. They shouldn't be sentenced on 4 separate counts because it was one course of conduct. You get what I'm saying? So that's kind of how the law looks at it. So that may be why they weren't sentenced consecutively. Because if it's one course of conduct, they can only be sentenced on 1 count. What you have here is you got the Crumbleys getting 10 to 15 years for 4 deaths because of their son and because of their actions buying their son gun and ammunition and ignoring the signs. And it really is a landmark case. So if you are, I don't know, let's say you're in Dublin, Ireland, for the sake of argument, and you're just kind of thinking about how to raise your children or watching this, make sure that you don't ignore warning signs, and make sure that that you should subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon. And I am your board-certified criminal defense lawyer, along with Michael Rivers, your content genius. And we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, police is at my God.